the radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this February 18th. Hope everybody is having a fantastic fantastic time and fantastic week. And yeah, you're doing well in spite of the, I don't know, geopolitical insanity that is going on right now. I don't know. This is my life, my world, and I have to say it's hard to stay sane in this environment. All right, we'll talk about Russia and the U.S., the love fest over in Saudi Arabia, a new global alliance and a new golden age is before us. We'll talk about China. And she's kind of a little bit of an about face. Jack Ma has been seen in Jack Ma and Xi in the same room. All right, so we'll see that. We'll talk about that. Taiwan, yeah, we'll talk about Taiwan. Some news about the hostages and a little bit about what might be happening in stage 2 of the negotiations of stage 2 of the hostage release negotiations. And we'll talk about insurance markets in the United States quickly. The FTC had an interesting decision today by the Republican head of the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. And then we'll talk a little bit about kind of a bit of Republican angst. And Jacob is actually in Taipei right now, so he's in Taiwan. So he will update us live on the happenings in Taiwan. As we speak. All right, so that is the program. I don't know. We'll see how long it takes. I don't expect to go long today, partially because I said a lot yesterday about what I think about these things. But more information has been revealed that only reaffirms everything I told you yesterday. Sadly, I want to be wrong about this. I do. I really want to be wrong. Anyway, we will be talking. So I want to remind you all, you can support the show. The show doesn't exist without support from you, from viewers, listeners. This is a listener-supported show. Please consider becoming a monthly contributor on Patreon, patreon.com. Just put in Yaron Brook Show and you can easily set up. You can also do it on PayPal, but I think Patreon is just easier to navigate. I also want to remind you, those of you on live on YouTube, those of you on Twitter, come over to YouTube. It's more fun over here. You can come over to on YouTube. You can support the show with a sticker like Nevfel has done. And Ryan has done, while reminding us to like the show before you leave. But more importantly, you can ask questions, which is a great way to kind of shape the show, mold the show, determine what I talk about, because I answer every single one of the questions asked. No question goes unanswered, except for the questions I say. Like, it's very, very rare. 1 in 5,000 questions I say, no, I'm just not gonna answer that question. But they deal with very, 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 whoops, what's that? Very limited issues that things I don't like talking about. All right. So let's start. Yeah, let's start. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the Russian Foreign Minister Navarro met in Saudi Arabia, and yeah, they have come to the conclusion that a peace deal is possible. They will actively work towards a peace deal. They will set up a working group consisting of Americans and Russians to negotiate a peace deal between America and Russia. Oh no! Wait a minute. We're not at war with Russia. Between Ukraine and Russia. Yeah, you're right. Ukraine's not there. No, they're going to negotiate a peace deal without Ukraine. The outlines of such a peace deal already kind of being leaked and being revealed. As I told you before, no NATO membership, some kind of security guarantees provided by Europe. The United States, despite the fact that the United States is negotiating this, will have no involvement in the security guarantees provided to Ukraine. Russia will maintain significant chunks of land within Ukraine, yet to be determined what those will be. There will be no peace deal, no agreement signed until Ukraine has elections. What did I tell you about puppet government in Kiev before Trump leaves office? A Russian puppet government in Kiev? They won't need. They'll just hand Ukraine over to the Russians. If they have elections and the Russian puppet wins, which is very likely given Russian influence, Russian ability to manipulate elections, Russian ability to defraud elections, and the chaos of war in Ukraine right now, yeah, it wouldn't be surprised at all if a Russian wins, even though Zelensky, in spite of everything you hear online, latest polls show him still with a 50+% approval rating, a Russian puppet will win. So elections before any peace deal. God, it's so infuriating. And finally, as I said, no, the lifting of all sanctions against Russia by the Europeans and the Americans. I have anyway, I'm not going to say it. Including, and this was a point Rubio made. So this I heard. He actually expressed this. He said that once all this is done and all this is everything, Russia and the United States will be able to, quote, take advantage of the incredible opportunities to partner with Russians geopolitically, because they have so many joint interests, on issues of common interest, and economically, because America needs Russia economically, because Russia has so much to offer the United States economically. It turns out that I think Zelensky really pissed Trump off last week by rejecting the deal Trump offered of basically the United States owning the Ukrainian economy and all its natural resources in exchange for Trump being nice to Zelensky. I also have this feeling, I can't, it's a feeling, no evidence to suggest that this is true other than the behavior of the parties involved. I have this nagging feeling that Putin has something over Trump, that something other than just Trump admires him, he's got something over him. It's just too easy. Trump just rolls over when told so, to do so. He's like his lapdog. It's truly stunning. Anyway, what this so-called peace deal means is, as I told you in the last few days, and as I told you before Trump was elected, a complete capitulation to Russia, a complete normalization of Russia. One of the first things they want to do, according to many sources, is bring Russia back to the G7, bring Russia back to, the meetings of the big economies. Trump wants Putin there. He wants to be pals with Putin. He wants Putin involved. We want to benefit from Putin economically. One of the great tragedies of all this is it's completely unnecessary in a sense that Russia is in deep, deep, deep trouble. In every respect, the United States, and indeed Ukraine, via the United States, has a huge advantage over Russia. Russia indeed needs peace. It needs peace. It's struggling economically. Standard of living, quality of life is declining dramatically in Russia. It is the amassing of military equipment that they are doing right now, the investment in a wartime infrastructure is destroying the quality of life and standard of living of Russians. They've got high inflation, incredible debt levels. There's no entrepreneurial activity. The oligarchs are doing okay, but everybody else in Russia is doing terribly. Russians have lost well over 100,000 people died in this war, hundreds of thousands injured. Russia's not doing well. It's, yes, constantly advancing, but inch by inch, at a massive human and a cost and equipment cost. And we are acting like Russia's strong and we are weak. On the other hand, the U.S. economy is doing fine. U.S. economy is overwhelmingly larger than the Russian. Standard of living in the United States is 10, 20x what it is in Russia. We could continue supplying Ukraine with weapons for another, 50 years, and it won't really make a dent in our economy. And Russia can't afford to do that. It's just unbelievable. And what you're seeing here is, I mean, I never had much respect for Marco Rubio, but Marco Rubio basically has gone from being a second-rate senator with some strong foreign policy views to a complete Trump acolyte who basically has no say and is just doing what Trump tells them to do. I will say that Trump's emissary to Ukraine and the Russian conflict, the guy he appointed, a former general, was not in Saudi Arabia, has been completely sidelined from this negotiation because he's a tough guy and he's pro-Ukraine. So he's been sidelined. Yeah, I think Emil has it right. Even Chamberlain would think this was weak. Chamberlain at least feared a real threat from Nazi Germany. The Nazis were building by far the biggest military machine in Europe at the time. And there was a real threat of war, which manifested itself ultimately, but that the UK was going to get in deep trouble over and did. There's nothing to fear from the Russians. Nada. Nothing. There's just American weakness. If this was Biden, oh my God, what the right would be doing right now. They would be, and think about what's happening in Beijing. We'll get to Beijing in a minute, right now. With the celebration, the look about, okay, we can deal with Trump. Think about what Trump has done over the last 2 weeks. We decouple from Canada. Economically. We reject Canada. Canada supplies us with oil and minerals and all kinds of stuff and has a close relationship and is friendly, and we share a military alliance, and it's our friend. Canada is our friend. We decouple from Canada and we embrace Russia. Canada has a stronger, even with Trudeau, a stronger, more vibrant economy, much more reliable. Russia is an enemy in some respects. What exactly do we need from Russia? Oil? More oil into the world market so prices drop further, which will just cut back the amount of oil we drill in the United States because prices will be too low to make a profit. We don't need Russian oil. So what exactly does the United States have to benefit from Russia? From economically? Or for that matter, geopolitically? What interest do we share with a dictator, a thug like Putin? Nothing. But we basically, completely, utterly, unequivocally caved. Given up. Remember that Marco Rubio was, until recently, the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. And he signed a letter addressed to Biden about, the Russian intelligence agency, the GRU's responsibility for attacks on Americans. Now, he thinks there are incredible opportunities for cooperation with Russia, both geopolitically and economically. Talk about an about face. I think the term little Marco is now, should be codified. Little pet Marco. Trump's pet. In the negotiations, the United States wanted a guarantee from Russia that in the meantime, they would stop bombing civilian infrastructure, particularly energy infrastructure in Ukraine. Lavrov said, what are you talking about? We don't bomb civilian anything. We don't bomb civilians. We don't bomb civilian energy systems. We don't bomb civilian anything. And he rejected the idea of a Russian guarantee not to bomb civilian stuff because they don't bomb them anyway. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. And what did Marco Rubio do? I don't know. I wasn't in the room, but my guess is he said, oh, okay. I didn't realize you guys were not targeting civilians. Good for you. Wow. Cool. So what are they trying to, what they're going to get? We're going to get a pause to the war. A pause, not peace, pause. We're going to get elections, and then we'll sign a peace deal. The peace deal only after the puppet regime in Kiev is appointed, a Russian puppet regime. And yeah, this is, I've said it before. This is complete and utter capitulation by the United States. For what? For nothing. For nothing in return. Nothing in return. And I think they know this. This is why Keith Kellogg, the retired general, and the envoy for the Ukraine was not even there. Right? In the meantime, Trump held a press conference today, as he often does. And, Zelensky went on and said that he wants a seat. He's not going to accept any peace deal that he is not a part of. He's not going to accept threats by the Russians. He's not going to accept threats by the United States. He demands to be part of the negotiations. And, he is not going to do what the Russians want him to do. So President Trump came on a press conference today and slammed Zelensky for demanding a seat at the peace negotiation over his own country's future. He said to Zelensky, "You've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it in 3 years. You should have never started it." How do you deal with a president that, at least when it comes to foreign policy, is this immoral? I'm not going to say ignorant because I don't think he's ignorant. Yeah, Zelensky started this war. Absolutely. Putin had nothing to do with it. Putin was caught off guard. Caught off guard. It's Zelensky who, ordered Russian troops into Ukraine landed special forces teams in the airport in Kiev, trying to take over Kiev. Literally, Trump said, you've been there for 3 years. You, Zelensky, been there for 3 years. You should have ended it in 3 years. He didn't say this to Putin. He said this to Zelensky. You should have ended it in 3 years. You should have surrendered, in other words. Why'd you fight? What the hell are you thinking? Fighting for your country, trying to defend it from oppressors. You should have never started it. I don't know. You guys voted for Trump, some of you. You tell me how this doesn't make you sick. How this literally doesn't make you sick. Now notice, Trump didn't quite say this when he was running for president. He didn't quite say this in the first few weeks. He's saying this after he spoke to Putin. That's why I say Putin has something on him. He's basically spewing line by line lines from Putin or from Tucker Carlson. Take your pick. You should have started. You shouldn't have started. You guys can rationalize it all you want. What Ann says, he thinks the push to put Ukraine in NATO provoked Russia. Provoke? First of all, Ukraine didn't push to join NATO, and Ukraine didn't start the war. And whatever you think, Russia invaded Ukraine. Russia is the aggressor. Provoke? Provoke to join a defense treaty is a provocation? That the United States, the leading member in NATO, the founding member of NATO, the force behind NATO, should accept that slander and lie and complete misrepresentation of reality? Putin has never said that he was provoked by Ukraine joining NATO. Putin has said Ukraine belongs as part of Russia because the Ukrainian people are really Russians and they are all part of the same spiritual Russian nation. He said that in July 2022 before the war. I don't know. I guess it doesn't matter, right? I guess this is the thing. It doesn't matter. Most people don't care about Ukraine. They don't care about Europe. They don't care about geopolitics. They don't care about America's position in the world. They don't really care about China either. You know, he's going after the left. He's cleaning up DEI. That's it. You know, if he betrays the good in the world, if he embraces evil in the world, it doesn't matter because he's going after DEI, right, guys? I mean, he's. I'm not gonna speak to Dave Smith about anything. He's going after DEI. He's going after the left, and therefore this is all good, right? And you know, anybody. I mean, this is the thing about somebody like Dave Smith. Anybody who could justify Hamas and can justify Putin does not deserve to be spoken to and does not deserve to be listened to. There is no argument, valid argument, for supporting Hamas and supporting Putin. It puts you in a certain rung of hell, not in the afterlife, but in this world. And it puts you in a certain category of human being that I'm not interested in debating. That combination, it just shows how anti-human life you are. How anti-freedom, liberty you are. I don't care what other ideas you spout. In the meantime, the Europeans are massively panicking, as you would expect. They try to meet in Paris and try to negotiate something. There's some news about some big, enormous package that they're going to offer Ukraine, military support. They're going to issue special bonds like they did during COVID that are backed by the entire European Union. I don't see how they get this through. There are at least 2 European Union members that oppose any support of Ukraine. That is Hungary, as Orban, and Slovakia's prime minister. I think those people are only emboldened now by Trump. Trump is now, without any question, you'll find this out in the months to come. Another prediction Yaron is making, that Orban is definitely the most favored European to the Trump administration. Trump will love Orban. Certainly J.D. Vance loves Orban. So I don't know how you. I think things in the EU like this have to be passed unanimously, and I don't see how you get by Hungary and Slovakia. But we'll see. We'll see. The Europeans are mad. They're angry. We'll see who wins the Romanian election. It could be a right winger that's pro-Russia. We'll see what happens in Germany on Sunday. It could be the AfD. I don't think they'll win, but they could get a major position which allows them basically to veto anything that Germany does. And AfD is super pro-Russia. To me, being pro-Russia is the litmus test. If you're pro-Russia, if you're pro-Putin, just like if you're pro-Hamas, you're out. There's just no excuse for that. Putin is a thug, an authoritarian thug. You prefer him to Europe? It says a lot about what and who you are. Yep. The thugs are gaining control. The thugs are gaining control. And it's not going to be pretty. And we've got, this is what, a month in to Trump's presidency, less than a month. It'll be a month and 3 days. It's a month into Trump's presidency. Where do we go from? I mean, it's only going to get worse. This is just the opening salvo. This is just the opening bid. It's only going to get worse. And, I warned you. I warned you. Now, yeah, I mean, good things will happen. Thumbs up to energy and thumbs up to deregulation of business. All of that is fantastic. And if you're a businessman, I accept that is what you're focused on, and that's what's important to you, and that's what you're going to be. But what I wish I saw more was that plus a recognition, a real recognition, that that Trump's a bully and Trump's a weak bully, and that Trump is somehow in Russia's pocket. I mean, that would at least tell me that you're being objective. Okay, you love some things Trump does and you hate others. But if you ignore the things you hate or the things you should hate, and you only support Trump because he stands up to the left and because he deregulates, you're not being objective. You're just not being objective. All right. To be continued as these exciting negotiations and as the betrayal of our allies and the embrace of our enemies continues. Talk about a potential enemy, but maybe somebody we're going to be embracing soon. China. China, as I've been telling you for over a year now, since 2022, really, China's been in real economic problems. It continues to try to restructure its economy away from real estate. Real estate has been a disaster. It is trying to create kind of a consumer economy. It's trying to increase the wealth of individuals within China. But to do that, the Chinese have to be productive. And they can't just rely on real estate speculation. They can't just rely on government bailouts. And they can't just rely on supplying very low margin manufacturing products to the rest of the world. It's very difficult to survive that way. China achieved great things, amazing things in terms of wealth creation, when it allowed its entrepreneurs the freedom to be entrepreneurs. In the 90s and 2000s, it was manufacturers, and it was it was finance, it was banking, it was investment banking, it was all of that. In the 20-teens, it was tech, Tencent, Alibaba, it just blew up, and they were huge. Jack Ma became one of the richest people in the world and was one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the world, and they were really innovating. And it looked like, China was a real threat to the United States, and it looked like economically it might surpass the United States. And Xi came into power knowing that that's what he had to suppress. He came into power fearing that economic freedom, economic liberty will ultimately result in the demand for political liberty, which we've all been saying would happen. And when Jack Ma stood up in, 2018, 2019, and criticized the Chinese government, criticized them for overregulation and for controlling and for, in front of senior people in the Communist Party, in front of the central bank, Xi had it. And he basically had Jack Ma sidelined. Jack Ma disappeared for a while. And a complete thrashing of the Chinese tech sector ensued. IPOs were canceled. Companies were downsized. Companies were forced to spin off. Antitrust suddenly became a big issue. In addition, entrepreneurial companies were much more strictly overseen, and startups, and then finance. Xi went after the bonuses finance people were getting. Bonuses disappeared. Wages went down. Finance became less about allocating private capital and much more about doing what the government tells it to do. And since then, China's economy is basically flatlined. It's become stagnant. Xi basically killed the goose that was laying the golden eggs. Freedom, economic freedom. And he killed it in the two sectors most responsible, at least over the last 15 years, for that economic success, maybe the last 20 years, tech and finance. And again, the results of being stagnation. And, implosion in what you'd expect, the real estate sector, but then no pickup in the rest of the economy. And, this has truly hurt China's ability. It's hurting its military, it's hurting its tech. Once in a while, you still get some tech innovation out of China, like we saw with DeepSeek. But generally, China has lacked innovation. It is falling behind on chips. The Biden administration put all these restrictions on what could be sold to China. That has hurt it significantly. But more importantly, it just lacks entrepreneurial energy. Entrepreneurship, new startups have plummeted in China. Shenzhen in the south of China, across from Hong Kong, which was the place in which the Chinese economic boom started in the 1980s. Shenzhen was the place that Deng Xiaoping said, let's experiment with freedom. Let's see what happens if we leave this alone and we don't intervene and we don't regulate and we don't control. Maybe we can turn this into another Hong Kong. And Shenzhen boomed. It became a metropolitan of well over 20 million people from nothing, from a little village. And it became a high-tech center. And it boomed. And it's really increased in growth every single year. Shenzhen this year reports the first drop in fiscal revenue since 1990. This is the engine of growth for China. Guangzhou, Dongguan, Shenzhen. I forget the name of that district in China. Guangzhou, Dongguan, something like that. Guangzhou is a city, Dongguan is a city. There's a name of the region that's similar to that, where Shenzhen is. And that's the engine of growth. And that's not growing anymore. China's in deep trouble. And it appears Xi knows this. And as a consequence, over the weekend, over this last weekend, Xi put together a big conference for private entrepreneurs in Beijing. He brought all the Chinese tech bosses there, all the Chinese private businessmen. And for the first time in a long time, Jack Ma, Alibaba's co-founder Jack Ma, whose company and who personally has borne the brunt of the anti-tech, anti-entrepreneur, anti-business attack. He bore the brunt of it. He was there. He sat down with Xi. They made a show of the fact that they were together. The conference included the CEOs of a robotic startup, Unitree. Robotics are going to replace. You're going to see a lot of the manufacturing in China be robotics. I mean, this idea that manufacturing jobs are coming back to the United States. No, there are no jobs. Robots are going to build stuff in the future. Manufacturing is dead in terms of job producing. There are not going to be any jobs created in manufacturing. China knows this, and that's why it's less concerned about shrinking population, because it's replacing its workers with robots. CEO of electric car giant BYD, the largest electric car manufacturer in the world, the dominant player in the world right now, bigger than Tesla. And of course, the CEO of DeepSeek, the new player in the whole world, including the CEOs of Tencent and the new people at Alibaba and Jack Ma, all really in an attempt to try to indicate that the Chinese Communist Party is changing its attitude and is interested in a revival of the private sector, particularly in tech. Private investment in China, basically has been declining really since Xi came to power, but has reached new lows, at least in the modern era, in 2024, and has been in steady decline since 2022, when, if you remember, lockdowns were opened up and things returned to normal supposedly. China's getting ready for a trade war with Trump, or maybe negotiating with Trump, maybe negotiating with Trump's special emissary, special representative for all things China. I think it would be appropriate for Elon Musk to take on that responsibility. So there seems to be an opening up in China towards tech. As a consequence, Chinese stocks on the Hong Kong exchange have been going up recently, with the idea that the government is becoming more tolerant of economic freedom, at least within the tech sector. Maybe the success of DeepSeek and the extent to which it shocked Americans is having a positive impact on loosening things up. But Xi realizes, or at least people around Xi probably realize, that China cannot compete in the global stage. China cannot fulfill its ambitions militarily. It cannot fulfill its ambitions really in any front without a robust economy. And whether they like it or not, and they don't, they need a robust private sector to have a robust economy. And it seems like rehabilitating Jack Ma and pretending at least, or allowing some freedom within the tech sector, the private tech sector, is the way in which they're trying to do this and trying to regain some economic vitality. Whether it'll work or not, probably not. Probably not. So yeah, I mean, China's going through this process. We'll see what happens, where it goes. We'll be following along with this closely. In the meantime, Taiwan must be looking at Ukraine and really, really, really worrying. Trump has indicated on several occasions that he's not committed to defending Taiwan. And most recently, he threatened massive tariffs on Taiwan, up to 100%. Taiwan is worried, scared, and as it watches the United States stab in the back its allies, Jack Ma lives in China. He does not live in Japan. He does not live anywhere. He lives in China. As Taiwan looks at all this, yeah, it's got to worry. And one of the things that it wants desperately right now, and is hoping that Trump will at least go along with this, is it wants weapons. Taiwan is putting a package together that is probably somewhere between $7 and $10 billion of arms that will include coast defense cruise missiles, HIMARS rockets, and anything to defend it against a amphibious landing of Chinese troops. Probably lots of drones, although Taiwan is probably in a better position to build drones than the United States is. It is looking to buy a bunch of weapons that the United States has not in the past sold the Taiwanese. So I would say buy them quickly, because Trump could change his mind on a dime and sell you down the river to the Chinese without any hesitation. The one thing I think we now unequivocally know about Trump is you cannot trust him. Cannot trust him. So Taiwan trying to buy weapons from the United States, see if that goes. Now, Jacob is in Taiwan. He says he's in Taipei right now. One observation: low protein intake and not much resistance training, but low caloric intake. Lots of skinny, fat body types. Okay. Thank you, Jacob. What else did Jacob say? He says, I feel that Taiwan could boom economically if they had less respect for government, Confucius influence, great people. I love it here. Even though they're kind of thin, fat, whatever. Taiwan is one of the freest economies in the world. I think based on every economic freedom index, Taiwan is freer than the United States. It's got a free economy than the US. So, yeah, I agree with you. Taiwan could boom even more if they had less respect for government and if they unleashed capitalism, if they became even freer, if they really went all in on capitalism. There's no question. But it's doing pretty well as compared to almost every country in the world. Jacob says, why is Japan so much cheaper than the West? Taiwan has equivalent taxes, increased zoning laws, etc. Could it be fewer health transfers, wealth transfers, and labor regs? Definitely fewer wealth transfers, a much smaller welfare state, a lot less regulations. And the fact is that you've got lower wages. Now, again, wages are very high if you adjust for what do you call it, cost of living. PPP adjusted, what's called PPP adjusted, something parity, purchasing power parity, PPP adjusted. But in absolute terms, their wages are lower than the United States. They pay their employees less, which means all the factors that go into production are cheaper. But yes, things in Spain, when we were in Spain, we were shocked at how much cheaper groceries were in Spain than they are in the United States. But of course, the wages in Spain are dramatically lower than the United States. It still is true that an American spends less on a basket of groceries as a percent of his income than do Europeans, and my guess is even Taiwanese. Although, again, Taiwan's a rich country, so that might not be the case in Taiwan. It's richer than European countries. Europe thinks it's rich, but it was rich, could be rich, but not particularly rich right now. Okay, where are we? Yeah, quickly on insurance. We've talked about this, but I think it's good to remind everybody. And there's a study, an article out of Bloomberg about a study that was just done about the insurance industry as a whole. And you know, insurance under capitalism is supposed to, in a sense, shield us, give us protection, give us downside protection from from nature, from the damage that nature can cause us, hurricanes, earthquakes, wildfires, and whatever. But when you tinker with capitalism, when you tinker with markets, right, that and you put price controls on insurance, you put regulations to prevent premiums from being high, pricing people out of neighborhoods, but they should be priced out of neighborhoods that are high risk. What happens then is that the insurance cannot cover the damage. There's just not enough insurance to cover the damage. So, and you provide disincentives. You're incentivizing people to build in danger zones. Whereas the whole purpose of insurance, or a big chunk of the purpose of insurance, is provide the right kind of incentives to prevent people, by raising prices, from building in areas that are dangerous. Right? And you know, that is what insurance has done. That is what regulations have done. They basically forced insurance companies to underprice their product, which means that we don't have enough insurance to cover all the problems. But it also means that people continue to build where they shouldn't be building, in hurricane zones, in flood zones, in earthquake zones, in fire zones. By some estimate, the United States housing market, just the housing market, is underinsured by something like $1.7 to $2.7 trillion. By one estimate, given climate change, you know, or the warming or whatever's going on, that 70,000 U.S. neighborhoods are going to see falling property values because of, you know, disastrous weather events. And premiums should go up, maybe will go up, but are not going up fast enough to cover all this. Now, of course, somebody's going to cover the 1.7 to 2.7 trillion in expenses. Usually what happens is the federal government does. It comes in and bails out all the underinsured neighborhoods. How does the federal government do it? Through tax revenue. So basically, you're taxing the safe places in the United States where not a lot of people live, in order to subsidize the dangerous places in the United States where a lot of people live and more people are living. Florida, you know, the Gulf of America coast, California, parts of the Midwest that are susceptible to flooding. The rest of the country pays the disaster relief for them. A massive redistribution of wealth, massive bailouts, and really all caused by not allowing insurance to do its job, not allowing insurance to actually function, regulating and controlling insurance, and that creates massive moral hazard. That is behavior that is overly risky, where you don't pay for the damage, somebody else pays for the damage. FEMA, redistribution, taxpayers pay for the damage. But you get the advantage of living in beautiful California until the fire or the earthquake knocks you out. And then taxpayers step in and bail you out. What a system we built in this country. It's just truly, stunningly amazing. Amazing. All right, the Federal Trade Commission. The Federal Trade Commission is usually together with the Justice Department, responsible for filing antitrust lawsuits against companies, successful companies in the United States. It is the spearhead of the anti-business, anti-business part of the government. Under Biden, the head of the FTC was a woman named Lina Khan. We talked about Lina Khan a lot on this show. She was a real piece of work, a real evil lady who, for years and years and years, had a thing for Amazon and was intended on going after Amazon. She had filed lawsuits against Google and Amazon and Apple and pretty much every big tech company. Some of the lawsuits were originally filed by the Trump administration before her. But in 2023, the FTC and the Department of Justice created merger guidelines. Merger guidelines that were very, very, very restrictive. That is, guidelines, the FTC has to sign off on mergers of companies. And these were very restrictive because Lina Khan was an anti-business, anti-big business, anti-really business leftist. And she and the Biden Justice Department created a document, guidelines, that basically laid out the framework for what mergers they would approve and what mergers they would not, and how they would go about and analyzing it. And this was a terrible document. I think we reviewed it at the time in 2023. I talked about this. It was a very, very anti-business document. Well, we now have a new FTC chairman, Andrew Ferguson. And this is what he tweeted today. Andrew Ferguson, Trump appointee, Trump acolyte, friend of J.D. Vance and Donald Trump and the New Right. Today, I informed staff at the FTC that the 2023 FTC and Department of Justice joint 2023 merger guidelines are going to be repealed, scratched, disappeared, and we're going to do something new pro-business. You wish. I wish. Wouldn't that be refreshingly amazing? No, that is not what he said. He said to the ANFORM staff at the FTC that the 2023 FTC and Department of Justice joint 2023 merger guidelines are in effect and will serve as a framework for our agency's merger review analysis. These guidelines build on previous guidelines and many decades of case law. That stability is important for enforcement agencies and the business community. Speechless. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I mean, again, this is an area where you thought Trump would be better. Deregulation. Better than Biden. And indeed, at the beginning of the first Trump administration, he was fairly good. He had continued the new antitrust tradition, which was started under Reagan and continued under, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, and then early Trump, the first 2 years of Trump. That was fairly hands-off on mergers and acquisitions, fairly hands-off on antitrust. Now, that changed towards the end of the Trump administration, but was really only codified. The anti-mergers and the pro-antitrust position was only codified in 2023 by Lina Khan and the Biden Justice Department. Now what what Andrew Ferguson is saying, Trump's appointee is saying, we completely embrace Lina Khan and the work they did. And these guidelines are our guidelines, even though these guidelines are complete change from the guidelines of the pre-2016 Trump. Even Obama didn't change them, right? Where they were pretty soft on antitrust. Trump appointed this guy. And he's a darling of the right. But he is, I told you early on during the election that J.D. Vance was a huge admirer of Lena Khan. I'll say it again. J.D. Vance was a huge admirer of Lena Khan. Yeah, that explains it all. Ferguson is also in the Lena Khan model. American businesses should expect continued antitrust harassment, continued scrutiny of mergers. Not good for American business, not good for American productivity, not good for American future. Okay, what do we have? Yeah, I'll just mention this. It's kind of a funny story, but not unexpected. I'll just read you the opening lines of this article. Republicans are increasingly uncomfortable with President Donald Trump and billionaire ally Elon Musk's strategy to slash the federal government. Senator Jerry Moran warned the White House that dismantling USAID could hurt Kansans who sell their crops to a government program that fights hunger abroad. Idaho Representative Mike Simpson staff wants answers about how the Office of Budget Management directed hiring freeze, the OMB directed hiring freeze, would affect the National Park Service. Idaho, after all, right? Some GOP lawmakers, I'm reading from an article in Politico, some GOP lawmakers are privately expressing alarm as they pass around a letter the administration sent to fire USDA microbiologists working to stop bird flu and other animal diseases. Several Republican senators have also voiced concern about how NIH cuts could hurt universities back home. Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy, who earlier this month praised Musk for draining the swamp, on Saturday criticized the potential firing of probationary FBI agents as counterproductive for law enforcement efforts in his state. And Senator Lisa Murkowski warned that the administration's civil servant culling could hurt energy projects and wildfire management in Alaska. In other words, all these senators and congressmen are suddenly discovering that trimming government, even a little bit, like Musk is doing, a little bit, is going to potentially hurt, people, specific projects in their hometowns. They didn't buy into this. They're not pro-cutting government, cutting spending, not in their state, not on projects that are in their state, maybe other people's states. This political party, there's no strategy. There's no commitment to cutting the deficit, to cutting spending, to reducing government, to shrinking government, to limiting what government does. This is politics. This is the ugly side of politics, but it's a reality of politics in the world in which we live, which is unprincipled, pragmatic politicians who need to appease people back home in order to get reelected. This is what happens when you have a system that doesn't run on principles, doesn't run on ideas, doesn't run on strategy, runs on knee-jerk, let's have to go after XYZ. And congressmen who got elected not based on their ideas, but based on the goodies that they promised to bring back home. Musk is upsetting the swamp animals, partially by replacing them, by switching who they are. He's upsetting them. And the swamp is not going to go away very easily. And again, I think the real test of all this is going to be the budget that Congress passes, because that's ultimately the test of what government spends. And we will know a lot more about that in the days, weeks to come. We really will. We'll find out a lot more about what is happening. All right. All right, that is the news for Tuesday, February 18th. And thank you all for watching the Yaron Brook Show. Let me remind you that you can ask questions. We we've got a lot of questions, but to my chagrin, most of the questions are like $1, $5, $10 questions. I appreciate all those. Those are great. But we really need to get to our targets. We need some $20 questions. We need some $50 questions. We need some $100 questions. We're $150 into a $500 target because we're probably going to go an hour and a half to 2 hours. So consider, if you're going to ask questions from now on, to make them $20 questions. We've got lots of the $5. And those of you who can afford it and are so inclined and see value in it, please consider the 50 and the 100 so we can make a dent in our goal, in what we're trying to get to. For today, we're approaching, well, we passed the middle of the month. We're approaching end of month. We've got monthly goals we have to get to. Everybody has monthly goals, right? Oh, I didn't talk about the hostages. God, how did I not talk about the hostages? Thank you, Neil. I guess I was so upset about Ukraine that I forgot that I was so upset about Israel and the hostages. All right, so Hamas is accelerating the release of hostages in the phase 1. It wants to get to phase 2. It does not want Israel to step back in. I think it does fear that Israel going back in might actually, they will take it more seriously and actually eviscerate them. At the end of the day, Hamas is stronger than Israel thought, but weaker in the end, quite weak, and is worried about how they can sustain themselves, and therefore they don't want a renewal of the fighting yet. One day, but not yet. So they are accelerating the release of the hostages. So they announced today that they are releasing, I think it's 4 bodies on Thursday. So dead hostages, which is part of the deal. They're releasing 6 live hostages on Saturday, and then they'll release another 4 bodies after that. Among the dead hostages that they are releasing are the mother and 2 babies. When they were taken, I think they were less than 6 months old and 2 years old. They would have been 4 and 2 now, but they are both children, both babies are dead, as is the mother. The father was released earlier, and he wasn't with the mother and children. How they died is unclear. We don't know. But look, I mean, I know this is for everybody breaking news, but we've known they were dead for a long time. Israeli intelligence has known this. Israelis have known this. The family was told this. Everybody held up hope that they were somehow alive. But everybody's really, if you face reality, they have known that they were dead. So those cute baby pictures on the posters that demonstrators in the US and in Europe love to tear down, those babies are gone. They were killed. And they were murdered by Hamas. One way or another, they were murdered by Hamas. I don't know what more. I mean, I know everybody's horrified, and you should be. But the real horror is October 7th. The babies that were burnt, shot, killed in safe rooms, in hideouts, in front of their parents. I mean, it's horrible that these 2 babies are dead because there was some hope they could still be alive. But it's 2 more babies, children, that Hamas has murdered October 7th and since. These are monsters. By the way, from what we know, the woman and the babies were not taken hostage by Hamas. They were taken hostage by Gazan civilians who crossed over the border in an opportunistic rape and murder and looting spree. the blood is on the hands of really all Gazans, but certainly a majority of Gazans. This is not a war with Hamas, and never was. This is a war with the Palestinians. This is a war with Gaza. Sadly, it hasn't been won. Gazans have not shown any indication they are defeated. Hamas might be weak. Gaza is not. Its commitment to destroy Israel is not. Its commitment to rape, pillage, and murder again is not. And, you know, I don't know where things go from here. I'm still convinced that Trump will go to Saudi Arabia to meet with Putin and to meet with MBS, and he will come back with Saudi Arabia basically forcing a deal in Israel that creates a disaster long-term for Israel. I think the Trump Gaza building plan is like a crazy, what the hell, let's launch an idea out there. I don't think he's serious about it for one iota, 1 second. There's no way it's going to happen. What is really going to happen is a major compromise. And you can see that by repeated reports in Israeli media that every time Netanyahu wants to get tough, it is Witkoff, Trump's delegate to the Middle East, who shows up and gives the riot act to Netanyahu and pulls him straight and forces him back to the negotiating table. So Israel is negotiating with the murderers of babies. Israel is negotiating with rapists. Israel is negotiating with mass murderers. Israel is cutting a deal with these people and will continue to cut a deal with these people. And who will pay for that deal? Well, Israelis in generations to come. And Palestinians, by the way, will pay for it as well, because they're the ones who die in the greatest numbers, and they don't have to die. With a proper victory over them, they would change. It's like the Japanese changed and the Nazis changed. The Palestinians could change. But first, they need to be defeated. First, they need to be defeated. Hamas have always been savages. They're no less savages today, and they will be no less savages tomorrow. Their ideology, their philosophy, their religion, are those of savages. Hamas would have to stop being Hamas to not be savages anymore. Israelis, you know, Israel now is buying into the Trump thing of evacuating or sending all the Gazans out of Gaza, sending them somewhere, and nobody can say where. They say they're setting up the infrastructure for making that happen. It ain't happening, people. Once Trump meets MBS, it's over. MBS, just like Putin, will bulldoze Trump into the Saudi peace plan and the Saudi solution for this. It ain't happening. And unfortunately, Israel is as infected with weakness and altruism, maybe a little less, but almost as infected as America is. And I don't know. We'll see. With the babies' bodies coming back home, maybe Netanyahu's popularity will finally plummet. Maybe finally Israel will start thinking about somebody actually tough to put in the prime minister's position, somebody who will actually do what Israel needs done. Right? So, yeah, that's where we're going. I don't know where you get this, Boaz. Boaz says, really, no one can live now in Gaza. That's just not true. It's just zero truth to that. There's still water flowing into Gaza. There's still electricity in Gaza. There's still internet service and cell phone coverage in Gaza. They have tents. Israel is supplying mobile homes and bringing them into Gaza. And Egypt and the Saudis have a plan on how to rebuild Gaza that does not involve moving the Gazans out of Gaza. And it's completely doable. It's not a problem. There was no place to live in Tokyo when Tokyo was rebuilt. There was no place to live in Dresden when Dresden was rebuilt. You have no concept of how people can live if you think nobody can live in Gaza anymore. Wall Street Journal says it will take 20 years to clean up the destruction. The Wall Street Journal doesn't know what it's talking about. Maybe its standards, the Wall Street Journal standards, are the standards used by Boston, where it's going to take them 20 years to build a train station. But no, Gaza could be rebuilt quickly, relatively quickly, and without having to evacuate any of the people in Gaza. And all you need to do is bring in a couple of Chinese construction companies, and I'm not kidding. Not kidding. They would clear the place up. They would grind all that stuff into nothing, and they would rebuild in a few years. It would all be back. People can live in a tent for decades. People have lived in shacks in refugee camps in Lebanon. The Palestinians have lived in shacks in refugee camps in Lebanon since 1970. You have no sense of people's ability to survive under adverse conditions. No sense, which is surprising. But anyway, you don't have to believe me. You just have to wait and see my predictions come true. All I ask is when they do come true, that you acknowledge I was right here on the chat. That's all I'm asking for. They have access to fresh water all the time. Israel's pumping. The pipelines of fresh water coming in from Israel have been providing water for the Gazans since Gaza was Gaza. All right. Let us go to the super chat. Let me again remind you that we're way off target. Think about what you can do to help, maybe. You can do a sticker. You don't have to ask a question, but questions are great because questions prolong the show. All right, let's start. James, isn't the deal with leftist states like New York and California that on average you'll pay an extra $10K a year in taxes, but make an extra $50K a year in salary? That creative energies in those regions overrides the statism. Yes, I mean, that's the deal. And if that was just the deal, if the only issue was that you paid higher taxes in New York and California, I don't think New York and California would be suffering at all. And they wouldn't, particularly California, wouldn't see a negative population growth. Even though it's a small negative population growth, it's still there. Because I think you're right. You make more money, you pay more taxes, and you get to live in California, which is the best place, certainly in the United States, maybe one of the best places in the world to actually live. But the problem is that it doesn't end with taxes. Because of housing policy in California, housing costs are dramatically higher than the rest of the country. So not only do you pay higher taxes, but then you higher housing, higher prices for home. Homes are smaller, and they're much more expensive than other places around the country, like Austin, Texas, for example. You also have all kinds of obnoxious regulations and obnoxious mandates, like recycling and all kinds of other stuff. No plastic. You can't buy anything of plastic in California. And of course, you have insurance regulations that cause people to build in fire zones, and then the state doesn't maintain the fire lanes properly, and the state doesn't provide. So the state is not providing the services that you would, fire, for example, and police, for example, you would expect given how high the taxes you're paying. And then on top of that, if you live in San Francisco or LA, you have to deal with homeless people. You have to deal with them living all over the place. You have to deal with the fact that the police doesn't enforce shoplifting laws although that's going to change because it was just a what do you call it, a statewide referendum to make shoplifting a crime. So you've got to deal with all the rest of the stuff that comes with the fact that, with the badness of California, with the leftism in California. I mean, I loved living in Orange County, California. I cannot think of a place anywhere on the planet that was easier to live in. Except it was unbelievably expensive. And given all the regulations and controls, I'm not even talking about what they teach kids in schools and all of that, it became, I think for a lot of people, intolerable. I moved because of taxes, but for other people, other things like what they teach in the schools became intolerable. And they left. Crime was never an issue in Orange County, still is not an issue in Orange County. Orange County is clean, safe, easy, all the services are there. Fires are a problem. But other than that, yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful place, particularly where I lived in Orange County. But the leftists in California have made it difficult to live in California in a number of dimensions. For me, it was taxes. For other people, it's all the regulations. And for me, it wasn't like I was making more money in California than I would anywhere else. I was making the same money. I was just paying more taxes. Philippa, 999. Thank you, Philippa. I think this is Philippa's third super chat. Thank you. Isn't DIM hypothesis prediction precisely what is happening to us, to the U.S.? We are a rightist movement united by their, we have a rightist movement united by their religion, without any opposition, making things worse and worse, disintegrating the world order from after World War II. Yeah, I mean, I actually think that you're absolutely right. I've said this over and over again, that I think Leonard Peikoff's DIM hypothesis predictions are coming true. I think that's absolutely what's happening. I think Trump's coalition, the MAGA coalition, is a coalition of religionists wrapping themselves in a flag, America First flag, which is exactly what Leonard Peikoff predicted, and with ultimately a authoritarian agenda for the United States, an authoritarian plan for the United States, an authoritarian, that's what they want. That's what they ultimately want. And it's exactly what, Leonard predicted. And it's, one of Freeman says, old people MAGA, but it's not. It's a lot of young people overwhelmingly MAGA. I mean, young, they've shifted from the left to the right. The right is sexier now. But it's just as authoritarian as the left was, just as destructive of American culture, just as disrespectable, just respecting of the American founding in the Constitution. And it's really, really, really bad, and it's moving in exactly the direction he predicted. Sadly. And it's moving much faster than I thought it would. Not faster than he thought it would, faster than I thought it would. He thought within 20 years. I was the one who pushed him to make it 50. And I think he was more right than I was. Stringer Bell, thank you for the $20 sticker. I really, really appreciate that. Slowly inching towards our goal. Keep it up, guys. Thank you. Thank you, Felapa. Andrew, for Israel to pursue war properly, do you think it would take a special bravery, given that it would have no major supporters in the world? Or do you think pursuing a proper war would garner the support of other nations? No, I think it would require real bravery. But, they should be too cowardly not to be brave. That is, at the end, they should be much more scared and afraid of the alternative, not winning the war, than getting the world's feathers ruffled, getting the world upset a little bit. Right? So, yeah. All right. Let's see. We got a bunch more questions, but still looking for, at least 3 more $20 questions. Looking for another $50, basically, at least. Value for value, guys. All right, Jonathan. Hey, Jonathan. I feel a sense of dread. From abortion rights to trade, we're going backwards. Well, abortion rights, trade, and foreign policy, and betraying our allies, we are going backwards. I share the sense of dread with you. I refuse to allow it to spoil my wonderful life. But when I think about politics, dread is the word that comes to mind. Whoops. Liam says, is MAGA unstoppable like the Nazis were unstoppable? Their time has just come and there's nothing the opposition can do to stop the fascist wave. No, I don't think they're necessarily unstoppable. I think there's still a remnant of the American sense of life there. I think there's still a remnant of sanity in America. I think, though, the opposition to them must be more principled, louder, more principled, and much more ruthless. I mean, I try to be ruthless. I'm trying to call Trump what he really is. I see too many people being hesitant because they're afraid of pissing MAGA off. They're afraid of the Scots of the world. They're afraid of what people will think of them. We need to be much more brutal in our appraisal of Trump. And this is why I continue to call him the names that I call him. I know it offends some of you, and I know some of you think it's a bad tactic. But the reality is, he is as bad as I've portrayed him for the last 9 years. He is no better than I've portrayed him over the last 9 years. And I'm not going to mellow, not going to moderate, and I think we need more people to be from the right, in a sense, from the free market, to be much, much more aggressive in the anti-Trumpism. And maybe we can sway enough people to at least put pressure on the Republicans, who generally don't necessarily agree with Trump, but are just becoming sheep, to maybe there's a constituency that they will lose if they become sheep. We will see. Hopper Campbell, large businesses are so entwined with government that it's difficult to tell where one begins and the other ends. No, I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true at all. It's easy to tell where Apple starts and where it ends. It's easy to tell what regulations and what they do for the government, and what the government does for them, and where that interacts. I think that's true with Google. I think that's also true of Palantir, and I think it's true of... So there's cronyism. I think it's true of the drug companies. You can actually draw the line. You can actually tell where they are. And I think it's wrong to fuse them, and thus I think it's unbelievably unjust to the large businesses. Large businesses are doing an unbelievably brave and heroic job of producing and creating and building in spite of all the government constraints placed on them. And if you say, oh, it's all one thing, you're doing them a massive injustice, lumping them together with the parasites, the moochers and the looters, which is what the government basically is today. James says, would you be able to interview Nicholas Frank? His father, Hans Frank, was the Nazi governor of Poland and Hitler's lawyer. He does a lot of interviews talking about watching for early signs of fascism. I'm not familiar with him. Let me copy paste this and see if I can get a hold of him. By the way, I should remind you that you can get a discount on auditing ARU courses through the Yaron Brook Show. So you can audit up to 10 courses that are available right now And you have access to 10 courses. You can attend live classes. You can watch my video later. You can attend office hours with faculty. You can ask questions in class. If you go to einrand.org/start here and you sign up for ARU as an auditor, and then use YBS10, you will get a 10% discount on whatever the cost is for auditing. So please consider doing that. You can audit, I think, a terrific class that's coming up, which is with me and Don Watkins on capitalism, 32 hours on the nature, the history, the philosophy, the morality, everything to do with capitalism. Please consider doing that. Go to einrand.org/start here and check out Auditing ARU. Clark, are you sure Plato wasn't an altruist? How could he blueprint such an effective system of opposing totalitarianism without altruistic ethics? I think he believed what he was doing. Now, I'm not a Plato expert, but this is what I get from people like, what's his name, Greg Salamieri, who is a Plato expert. I think what he was doing, he believed what he was doing, was trying to maximize individual happiness. But he believed individuals were detached from reality, and therefore detached from the ability to discover their own self-interest. And that his philosophers' king's jobs were to tell the individuals and guide the individuals to their self-interest. So if left alone, you will always marry the wrong person. The philosopher king can find you the right person to marry, not in the name of sacrifice, in the name of your happiness. Now, obviously that's monstrous and evil, but it's less monstrous and less evil than the perspective of you should all sacrifice for the state, for the nation, for God, for whatever, for your enemy, which is our philosophy today. So Plato's much better than anybody today in that sense. Not your average algorithm. Hamas just released the bodies of the innocent mother and children slaughtered by the scum of the universe. Yes. I don't think they have released them. I think they're releasing them on Thursday. Jonathan, the GOP is a cult of personality, zero capitalism, hard pass. Yes, you're absolutely right. Thank you for being a fox on a fox. A voice on Fox saying that. You're the only one. Nobody else is saying that. Thank you, Jonathan. Andrew says, how do you figure that a thinker like Victor Davis Hanson thinks wokeism is the existential threat to the West? As bad as woke is, how did it become the exaggerated threat that it is on the right? I mean, I think it is a threat to the West. It is the threat to the West if it never goes opposed. But once you realize that those who oppose woke are using it in order to become a bigger threat to the West, but that takes thinking and principles. And it takes recognizing things like religion and xenophobia and nationalism as enemies. And Victor Davis Hanson, as good as he is, you know, I did a panel once with Victor Davis Hanson at Berkeley. Me, Victor Davis Hanson, and Daniel Pipes. I don't know, 15 years ago, something like that, at Berkeley, maybe 16 years ago. And, I mean, we disagreed. He was not a real pro-capitalist. He's generally sympathetic to capitalism, but not capitalism. He was very anti-immigration even back then, very anti-immigration. He adores, his model for virtue is the Greek farmer soldier. To him, the model of virtue is the farmer soldier, I don't know, his grandfather, who was a farmer in California and who went to fight in World War II and brought victory to the United States. Maybe it's his father, maybe it's his grandfather. That's his model of virtue, a kind of a nationalistic, connected to the earth, working with your hands. He never understood the economics of immigration. He never understood the economics of technology. He's very, very good military historian and not much else. And, you know, that's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. I mean, people are experts in fields. It doesn't make them experts in everything, and yet they comment on everything. And I was a huge fan of Victor Davis Hanson's, but I also knew that he was flawed. And then I'd say over the last 15 years, he's become more and more and more flawed. The flaws have come out. It started with his ridiculous, viciously anti-immigration, writings, and then it was an embrace of Trump, and not just Trump, but the whole Trump agenda, national and kind of a nationalist agenda. So, and he's one of the better people in a sense that he can be critical of Trump. He's not a mindless acolyte that just follows everything. He can be critical of Trump, just not often enough and not on the right stuff. Ryan, where the hell is Europe in all of this madness over Ukraine? Well, I mean, Trump has basically told them to stay home. He's marginalized them. He's not allowing them to participate in negotiation. They're trying to come up with a plan how to save Ukraine from America, but it's hard because they all rely on America and NATO. They're frantic. And remember, the EU, the Europeans, it's 22 different countries. They don't all agree. They disagree on stuff. They're all not all in the same situation. Italy has no military to speak of. Many of the countries have no real military to speak of. So they're not all unified. And they all have their own agenda items. And it's very difficult for them to unite, particularly given that Donald Trump has basically turned his back on them completely. Again, abandoned his allies in favor of his enemies. I mean, I'm all for leaving NATO. But after you win the war with Russia, then the United States should leave NATO. I've always said, Europe is rich enough to defend itself. It doesn't need America. But to do it while embracing Putin at the same time, it's unbelievable. It truly is unbelievable. They've raised the white flag before they even started a fight. Eric, thank you for the sticker. Really, really appreciate that. Thank you. Stephen, do you think the Ukrainian peace deal will get so much criticism from both the left and the right that it will fade away? No. I don't think the right will criticize it at all. The left will criticize it, but they're the left who cares. I think it will go away because I don't think Ukraine will agree. But Ukraine could be forced into it, and because because the Europeans are so afraid, so divided. Right? Germany's a paper tiger. It has a large military force, but it's not very capable. It's undertrained, under-resourced, under weapons. They don't have enough weapons. The only serious military force in Europe, the only serious military forces in Europe are the Poles. Poland has a real military. The Scandinavians. Greece maybe. That's it. And the UK. The UK, although it's smallest military they've had in decades, maybe ever. So, Europe is going to have a really, really hard time challenging Russia without America. Now, it could again if Emmett, should Trump be impeached? For what? If he wasn't impeached the first time, for what? For firing for dropping the case against Adams in New York, for betraying Ukraine, for what? For imposing tariffs? There's no basis for impeach. We've just got the president we elected. I think, and of course nobody would impeach him anyway, but if he if the Supreme Court rules in a particular way and he says, I'm going to ignore you, that should be the basis of an impeachment. And then that's the real test of Republicans. Short of that, no. I mean, we get what we deserve. We get who we elect. You guys voted for him. He's all yours. Subcast, people say Republicans follow Trump because they fear him. However, I think it's because he allows them to be their worst selves. I agree with you. I think that's right. I mean, why fear him? He can't do anything to me. Can't do anything to these people. I think he brings out the worst in them, and they're enjoying being bad. Oh, and happy belated anniversary. Thank you, Supercast. I appreciate that. Yesterday was my wedding anniversary. Not your average algorithm. Andrew Bernstein argues Donald Trump is a hero, just a flawed hero. The right is very flawed, but the left is outright evil. Thoughts? You know my thoughts. What do you want me to say? I disagree with Andy. I disagree with Andy. Donald Trump a hero? God help us. God help Andy. I mean, what can I say? I disagree with Andy, and I've explained it a gazillion times over the last 9 years. And I like Andy Bernstein. I have no thing against Andy Bernstein. He hasn't attacked me like some have, so I have no problem with Andy. I just think he's wrong, and we disagree. Hector, I'm in Las Vegas, Nevada. What do you think of the city? It seems like a capitalist paradise. No, it's not a capitalist paradise. It's just a lot of casinos, and the gambling is allowed. And outside of Las Vegas, prostitution is allowed. But no, I mean, there's nothing capitalist about it. It's unionized and regulated and incredibly corrupt and everything else. So I like Vegas for a few days. I couldn't stay in Vegas. I think 3 nights is my limits for Vegas. It is pure materialism, which I like. Lights, flashy, women scantily dressed, fast cars, and just amazing hotels. Just beautiful, beautiful hotels and casinos. And some phenomenal restaurants. Some of the best restaurants in the U.S. used to be in Las Vegas. I haven't been in many years now. And I loved the place. I loved going. Used to go. There were years where I went 2, 3, 4 times a year. But no more than 3 nights, because I would go crazy after that. It's just too materialistic. There's not enough to nourish the spirit. There's only enough to nourish the body. And I can only tolerate that for a while. So I like Vegas. It's fun. It's exciting. It's filled with lights, filled with energy of a certain kind. But it's not capitalist paradise. Silicon Valley is a lot more capitalist paradise than Nevada, than Las Vegas, even though Silicon Valley is in socialist California. Hector says, love the show, just visiting Vegas. Enjoy, have fun. You know what happens in Vegas, stays in Vegas? Take full advantage of that. I'm not giving details. Michael, politically, would it be fairly easy to abolish the death tax? No, very difficult. Very difficult. Democrats would be against it. Some Republicans would be against it. How would you fill in the revenue gap? Where would you get the money to fill it in? No, not easy at all. And it's always a fight. The death tax, the inheritance tax is always a fight. So no, difficult. Enric, did the Human Longevity 100 Plus test with results and recommendations? He did it. Okay, he did it. However, my Kaiser doctor doesn't implement most of them. Recommendations for getting doctors and fulfilling health optimizations. Yeah, Kaiser's not a good deal if you're interested in what Atia calls health care 3.0. It's not a good deal if you're interested in preventive medicine, if you're interested in doing things that actually result in longevity and result in, not longevity, but health span and improved health. Find a private doctor, ideally, if you can afford one, a concierge doctor, who you tell about human longevity right off the bat, is excited about it because he gets to participate in it all, and he gets to see the results from human longevity and participate in figuring out what the treatment protocol should be, and is excited about that, and go with a doctor like that. That's who you want. So find a general practitioner, ideally, again, a concierge doctor, who is excited and wants to work with you on longevity and on health span. Boz, is the U.S. really going bankrupt? If yes, when, what would happen? Will DOGE save billions of dollars? What will happen to Social Security, Bitcoin? I mean, the U.S. could go bankrupt. It's certainly heading in that direction, no question about that. But the U.S. economy is incredibly robust and incredibly potent, and the world doesn't believe the U.S. is going bankrupt, so the U.S. can still borrow at very, very cheap interest rates. I don't know when it happens. It depends on the path the U.S. takes. But on the path it's on today, there's no doubt it will happen. That is, it will either have to hyperinflate its way out, or it will have to default, but it won't have enough money to pay off its debts. Will DOGE save billions? Sure, it'll save billions, but to reduce the deficits, you have to save many hundreds of billions. That is, you have to save over $1 trillion. Will DOGE do that? No, it will not. So DOGE will not have a significant material effect on the deficit and on the path towards bankruptcy. In order to do that, one has to reform Medicare and Social Security at the very least. You have to, those need major reforms. And right now, at least, there's no appetite for those reforms. Now, you could reform them easily. You could balance the American budget fairly easily. It's all doable. It's just a political nightmare. But you could do it. It wouldn't take long. And I'm not talking about laissez-faire capitalism. I'm just talking about just all you have to do is, you could raise payroll taxes. You could raise retirement age. And you could lower benefits. And Social Security saved. And then, and you could then turn around and you could voucherize Medicare, or you could privatize by voucherizing Medicare, and doing a few other kind of common sense, market-oriented things to Medicare, and you'd solve a lot of the problems. Not all of them, but a lot of the problems. And then you could go and instead of waste and fraud, getting rid of whole departments of government and getting rid of them. You could do all that. It wouldn't be that hard. It's just politically almost impossible given all the pressure groups and special interest groups. And the fact is that the group that votes the most consistently are old people, and they're the ones who benefit from Medicare and Social Security, and they don't want any changes made to it. James says, on a more optimistic note, I think Elon Musk is more of a threat to bureaucracy than democracy. Yeah, I'm not convinced of that. I hope you're right. I'm not sure. Given the lies and deception and misinformation and fake information that he is producing, he's producing more fake news than cutting dollars. I'm not sure he's a real threat to bureaucracy. I'm not sure. And I think he is a threat to democracy. If you assume that democracy requires an informed public, he is making the public stupid. And it's taking the energy and the time of many hundreds of people trying to correct all the falsehoods that Elon Musk is spewing into the public right now. It truly is unbelievable. I mean, the latest is, I don't know if you know this, but the gold in Fort Knox is probably not there. It's probably all gone. And nobody will let Elon Musk into Fort Knox to see the gold. And he now thinks that it's gone. And he wants into Fort Knox. It's going to be fun. Anyway, Andrew, there's a slippery slope from Trump doesn't really mean X proposal. He's just trolling. playing some angle. He's not being literal. So you know it's not such a bad idea. That's right. But he does have some things where he's trolling. But the trolling is, what's the purpose of the trolling? And look, I think he's, in a sense, trolling, playing some angle with the Israel-Gaza thing. But I think that is all in preparation for basically siding with the Saudis and betraying Israel. That's what I think. We'll see. Again, every one of my prediction will be tested by you. You can come on this show and say, Yaron, you were wrong. I encourage you. I want a list. All the things Yaron was wrong on. Please, somebody make that list. And maybe somebody else can make the list, all the things Yaron was right on. One of Freeman says, follow the money, or maybe follow the oil prices. Maybe Trump's grand strategy is to appease the Russians and to appease the Saudis. They will flood the market with oil. Oil prices will tumble, and he will be able to fulfill his commitment to the American people of reducing the cost of living. Maybe that is the grand strategy. Follow the oil. That would not be good for oil producers in the United States, but that's okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, all the super chatters. I will see you all. Don't forget to subscribe to the show if you're not a subscriber. Please subscribe. That way you'll find out about future shows. Like the show before you leave. And if you'd like to, and if you want to be a trader with me, value for value, then please consider supporting the show on Patreon at whatever rate you can afford or whatever rate you think it is of value. Patreon.com, just Yaron Brook Show, and become one of the community of supporters of the Yaron Brook Show. Thanks, everybody. I will see you all tomorrow. Tomorrow is at the normal time. Tomorrow will be a little earlier. We'll move to a little earlier. See you then. Bye, everybody.